Hello and welcome to our Section 2 review here in course D293. We're going to be going through the content and the material as a brief overview here for Section 2, but remember it's really important that you dive into that course of study for a more detailed, thorough explanation of these concepts and topics. Remember to work your way through the readings and watch the videos and resources and reach out to your course instructor if you have more information. But today I'm very happy to help walk you through some of those key ideas here that you're going to come across in Section 2. My name is Dan Barancata and I'm one of the course instructors here in this program. We're going to talk here about learning analytics, and when we think about learning analytics, I think it's really important that we try to put this into a context that makes sense. I like to use a doctor's analogy. So we've all sort of unfortunately likely felt sick before and had to consult a physician. It's something that's likely familiar to us in terms of a process. So we can think of learning analytics using that scenario to put it into context that's easier to understand. Because at the end of the day, analytics are analytics, whether it's the medical field, the learning and education field, or business, we're using these same analytics with the same goals in mind. So the first analytic here is to describe. When you're feeling sick and you decide that you need to consult a physician, you're going to make that phone call or you're going to go in to see that doctor. The very first thing that you're going to be asked to do is to list your symptoms. You're going to be asked to describe what's been going on. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to list things that have been happening. I've had a fever, I've had an upset stomach, I've had headaches. Whatever these symptoms might be, we're listing those. These are facts and things that have occurred in the past, and we know them to be true. And with that information, the doctor or the medical physician is going to try to diagnose us with what's going on. They're going to use the information that you've described, the facts that you've given them. They're going to use their knowledge, their skill, and their abilities as a medical professional, and they're going to try to answer why you're feeling this way. They're going to give a diagnosis. This is sort of the explanation for the facts that you provided. This is why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. This is why you have those symptoms that you've described. Once we've diagnosed that, we can then make a prediction, which is essentially a forecast or an educated guess about what's going to happen next. When we make this use these predictive analytics and we make this prediction or this forecast, we're trying to look forward into the future with what we think is likely to happen or occur. So we don't know for sure that this is going to happen, but this is what we think will happen next. And then once we have that idea of what's going to happen next, the thing that we're usually most interested in and after when we visit the doctor is sort of that prescriptive piece. This is where we're going to be sort of prescribed medicine or a prescription of doctor's orders, so to speak. This is what we need to do in order to feel better. This is the actions that need to be taken to get to a desired result in the future. So again, here we're looking forward, we're looking to the future, but what separates prescriptive from predictive is prescriptive is going to have that action tied to it, that we're going to be doing something to get to where we want to go, not just where we think we're headed. When we look at it in terms of learning analytics, again, to sort of put this into context, that descriptive is always going to be the facts and the what happened to us in the past. This is the information that we have, and these are data points that we can plot on a graph. And if you think of this in another analogy with me as a line graph, in order to create a line graph, we have to have data points. We have to have test scores or attendance rates, graduation rates, whatever that might be. We have that hard data that we can then put into a graph, and we'll end up with a line graph. That's our descriptive analytic. Then we want to understand and diagnose that. The diagnostic analytic is going to answer, why did that happen? Why is the data looking like this? Why does our line graph look the way it does? We see it, but why is it looking this way? So we're trying to put an explanation there for why it looks the way it does. Once we do that, then we can make a prediction, or we use our predictive analytic to forecast what's likely to happen in the future. So this is nothing that's happened yet, but based on all the things that we can see, the facts and our reasoning for why those facts are presenting themselves the way they are, this is what we think will happen in the future. So again, if you think of that line graph, it ends at a point on the right side there where our data points end. Where do we think that line graph is going to head? We could sort of trace it out in pencil with where we're anticipating that graph might go moving forward when new data points come in. Prescriptive, again, is going to be all about the future here, but this is, again, what should be done. We want to suggest a solution here. So more than just using a pencil to plot out where we think that graph is going to go, now we're going to draw a line here where we want that graph to go, and we'll put a little asterisk there because this is what we've got to do to get there. How can we increase our graduation rates? How can we increase attendance? How can we increase sales? What are these actions that we want to take to get to a desired outcome? And when we're using learning analytics and we're working through these, we're going to use different types of data. Quantitative analysis here, quantitative, we always want to think numbers. It's very numerically driven. It's statistics. It's a very objective process. It's numbers on a page. Again, these are those data points that we're able to plot on a graph, and that's what happened in the past. In order to have those data points, it's had to have happened in the past. Then we'll also want to use qualitative analysis, which is going to be used during that diagnostic stage because we're trying to determine why did something happen. So qualitative is all about what we see, what we know, our observations, reflections, the information, the experience that we have. We're going to bring all this together. It's much more subjective. We can't necessarily, quantify it and use data points for it, but we're taking into account our experiences, our knowledge, what we're seeing, what we're hearing to provide that explanation for why things are working out the way they are. We'll also use social network analysis here, where we're going to try to understand patterns that are showing themselves amongst groups. So a social group might be a class or a group of learners. How can we learn from this group and predict what might happen for future similar groups? And we'll use this social network analysis whenever we're comparing two groups of folks, or we might want to anticipate what's to come with another similar group that might be taking a training next week or next year. We can often look back and see if this is how a similar group performed, what can we predict might happen moving forward with another group. And we have all these learning analytics and we have all this data, but what are we trying to use it for? One of those things is data for improvement, which is really how can we improve? We want to constantly be iterating, evolving, changing, and updating our teaching practices and our instructional design. So when we use this data, we can make data informed decisions, and we're trying to improve the learning process. We're trying to improve our assessment, content, learning activities, all of those things. But we're trying to essentially enhance the overall experience for our learners and improve the learning outcomes. How can we make sure that all of our learners are reaching those goals and objectives that we have? We can use it for research as well. So we might want to ask the question about what is going on here or what can I do better? And this is often going to include a comparison, but we're trying to, really dive in here and gather some insights here and understand, is there a better way to do this? Might I try two different ways to teach this to students and then, look at the data to see which way seemed to be most beneficial for those students? How can we use these patterns to drive our effective instructional design and strategies? And then finally, we have data for accountability, which is really the where and the why of this data. When we think about accountability, we want to be asking those questions here where are we able to track and understand performance throughout a program, throughout an instructor or teacher or a particular class? Can we measure if our instructional materials are working? How is it lining up to others that are going through similar coursework? Where is the issues? Why are these issues presenting themselves? We use this accountability here so we can make sure that we're continuing to grow and improve here, but we want to make sure that our instructional design is appropriate and that everybody's doing it in an efficient manner. And whenever we're thinking about learning analytics and this type of data and making these data informed decisions, it's really important that we factor in the different ethical implications of using these learning analytics. So whenever we're collecting data, it's really important that we try to protect our learners. We're always want to be aware of potential privacy concerns and make sure that the information that is private, could be test scores, attendance reports, things like that, is staying in the hands of folks that it needs to and not being released anywhere it shouldn't. We want to always safeguard that privacy and those learner rights. And how can we use that data that we have as we collect this to make sure that we're advancing equity as well? We're going to then analyze that data after it's been collected. So this is where we're trying to understand what's going on with the data. What is the data saying to us? And we want to make sure we're drawing valid conclusions here. We want to make our decisions and reach our conclusions based on the data, not based on any potential biases that we might have, whether implicit or explicit. So we're going to look through that data. We're going to try to draw valid conclusions that's fair, that's accurate, and that lines up with the data that we're seeing. We also want to make sure that when we're analyzing this, we're protecting that data, but we're also considering the impact here. Based on how we act from this and what we're analyzing, there can be major impacts to students. So we want to be aware of that and make sure we're always taking an empathetic approach. And then finally, data for interpretation. This is really trying to get the insights from the data. So we've collected it, we've analyzed it, but what does it all mean here? And how can we share this information with others to make sure that we're making those improvements ultimately? And when we do that, we want to make sure we're always presenting this without bias and we're acting ethically. So, folks that are giving us this content, the material that we're evaluating here within the learning analytics, we want to remove any potential biases there. We want to remove any predetermined sort of notions of about what we think will happen or should happen or what we maybe have done in the past. We want to instead really look at the data and see what the data says. Now make sure you continue to take a look at those resources and course tips. Reach out to your course instructors with any questions and really dive into the course of study and all the information that's there. Best of luck to you.